Welcome back to my tutorial series for Java involving our physics simulator. As we can see what we had last episode. In this episode we're going to get into a very big brunt of things regarding lists. Now we're going to be using lists from the swing, but first we have a lot of things to import because this is going to be a very heavy class. So we're gonna import a lot of things, and of course, you know, we might be changing it as we go, and because you know what I want or what you might want could change. Now, how also the physics simulator whole system is going to be working for the tutorial series is that there's a lot of aspects to physics, and so our simulator should simulate a lot of things, not just just this force and stuff. Like we might make a gravity simulator where we would also get into collision and stuff, which I'm unfortunately not the best at collision, but we can always work through that. I can always learn more just for you guys. Now a force list is going to extend JPanel, because although it's going to contain a list, it's going to be a panel. Now when anything is prefixed by J, that means it's part of swing. I mean, I believe there's also a panel class. Yeah, there's panel, but that means it's not part of swing, which means swing basically makes it extend a whole branching tree of infinite hierarchy that lets all these components intermingle and stuff and do things together, and makes it very coder friendly as well as user friendly. So it extends JPanel, but it also implements one thing, and that will be list selection listener. Now, of course, we just want to add this. Add one of these warning marks, just that we can't use them. Yeah, it's never used. And the way we did our format style, I want it to be used. So now we have this. We'll just put it down there a bit. And now what we're going to do, first of all, is that we're going to declare a lot of variables we're going to do. Now, I sort my variables in several different ways, depending on like what I'm doing and how many variables there'll be. And normally I separate them based on their modifiers. Like there'll be one column for final, another for static, and another for just the availability things. And this time I'm going to do that, as well as separating private from public, just for the heck of it. So now we're declaring two strings. So we have add and remove. Then we just have a public static hash map. I showed you hash map in one of the episodes of my tutorial series having to do with things that are better than arrays and some iterators and stuff. And this is going to store a string as the key and a force, if I could spell it right, as the value. As last episode we declared force. Force doesn't have anything in it yet, but it will. So we have force map, and it's going to, of course, be equal to a new hash map, diamond notation. And there you have it. Next we'll have a private static button, which happens to be a J button, because we all love swing. And this is just going to be the button for removing things. Then another thing is going to be a J text field, which is a text field that you can edit and stuff. So that's how we're going to enter the names of our forces, and it's going to be force field. Yeah, force field. Basically what I do when I'm naming these components, I do what kind of field it is, so this is for removing things, and then I just suffix it with what it is. So this is a button that removes. This is a field that pertains to force, which just happens to make it a force field. Then we'll do up here, I missed something, a public static J list. This is a generic type, and it'll be a list of strings, because although our list could contain actual force objects, then the name of the indices would be weird. So it's just going to contain strings, but we're going to handle that by our hash map is here. So by the strings on the hash map and JList will be the same, so we can inner reference them. So we'll use the selected index on the list as the key to the hash map to get the force it's referring to, which you'll hopefully understand better when I get to it. So then down below these private static things, we're just going to have a private default list model, which is also a generic type. It'll hold strings since it has to be the same as the list it's going to be modeling. And we're just going to call this, what do you know, list model. So there are all the variables we will need for now. Next thing we'll actually need a constructor for this class. And the first thing we're going to do is call super. I explained this before as well. This will, call the constructor for this thing's parent class, and this person's parent class is JPanel, and we're going to set it to null because JPanel single constructor that's an object is going to be setting its layout. Now swing components. The swing has several varied different and applicable layout managers and layouts that you can use for organizing your components. Now what null does means it's absolute layout, which means we have to personally set the position and the size and the bounds of every object we do, and that means it stays there no matter what. So if you could resize the screen, then those things are going to stay in the exact location. Now that I said that, it reminds me we're going to do frame.setResizable false, because since we are going to be using absolute layout for this thing, and probably for the whole frame window as well, we don't want resizing it. Doesn't do anything good, so we might as well just not let you resize it. Speaking of that as well, we're going to do frame.setLayout null as well, so absolute layout. But then let's just go to the force back to this again. Now we're going to start setting up our list. So we're going to do list model equals new default list model, diamond notation since it can infer from its declaration. The initialization can go to the declaration and see that it's already a string, so diamond notation works, of course. So now it's not null. Now we're just gonna add an element right now, because if we didn't, adding elements to the list adds, well, indices to the list that you can actually select and go through. And instead of starting the list empty, we're gonna start it with something. It's going to be net force. Now, net force is not going to be editable, which we'll take care of later, but it'll display the net force on the object we have. So then, besides that, we're going to do list equals new list, diamond notation again, and it's going to be modeled after list model. Now we just continue with this list dot set selection mode. Means in order to get all the different selection modes, we're going to do list selection model dot. There are three things here. Multiple interval selection means you can select one or more contiguous ranges. Single interval means you can select as many as you want, but they don't have to be contiguous. And single selection is what we want, means you can only select one thing on the list at a time, because we only want it to display one force at a time. And I made a mistake of making this not JList. That should be JList. Okay, so then the next thing, we do list.set selected index to 0, just so it starts at the beginning. Now our first index, it's like an array, its first index is 0, and it goes on, so while we have one thing on it, which is net force, our length would be equal to 1, but we only have one index, and that is 0. So then we go on to list dot add the list selection listener, this, since, you know, this whole class is a list selection listener and it has the value change thing. And then we can do list dot set visible row count, which I only want it to be just a column. So it's just going to be one column of things going straight up and down. So we do jlist dot vertical, because it's going to be a vertical list, not like a grid of indices. And then we're going to do list dot set font, which is nice. We can get into fonts, but we have to say new font. Now the normal constructor for font accepts 3 arguments, and there will be a string that will be the font name. We're just going to do Arial. The only thing is that, you know, if you misspell it or anything, I believe you get an error. So, you know, if you can just remember all fonts like Arial, Courier, New is one of my favorite fonts, but I think Arial is good for lists. Times New Roman, you know, a whole bunch of stuff like that. So then there is Arial. Then we do the modifier, which we go to font and select one of these. It can be, you know, bold, italic, plain, and a whole bunch of other things. We're just going to make it bold, since bold makes it more visible. And then, of course, the font size, we're going to go with 24. And then we're going to make a new J scroll pane, which is a scroll pane, which we're going to make for the list. So if the list gets so big that it can't fit in the component that it's in, that it will add a scroll bar, so you can scroll up and down the list with ease and make sure you can see everything. Now we're done with that. We're going to make a J button add button. It's going to equal new J button add string. So that means this button, its text that's on top of the button will be equal to add string, which we declared earlier, which is add all caps. So then we're gonna something else we need to make 2 classes. We're gonna make a class called ActionListener, which will implement an action listener as well as a document listener, which will both be important. We're just gonna add the unimplemented methods and make them look a bit less ugly. Now our document listener. These are the first 3, you know, the ones who have document events are pretty easy. We won't be using them we're just going to make every time that it's called declare like one method. So that's why I'm just going to put them on one line for now. Our action perform thing is going to contain a larger brunt of the thing, so we're just going to leave that out. Along with that, though, we also need a private J button. And then we need a constructor. And in order, you need a J button. You know, this dot button equals button. That's all we're going to add for this thing. In the next episode, we're going to add full functionality. Well, over the next 1 or 2 episodes, I'm not sure how long it'll take, we're going to add full functionality to this whole thing. Right now we're just making sure the list works primitively, just so, you know, we can see it. And this is just going to implement, I believe this just implements ActionListener, which is perfectly fine with me. And we'll just type this one out, public void action performed action event E. Okay, that should be good for now. So now, silly me making all these errors. So now we can just do add listener, if I can spell it right, equals new add listener. Then the button we're going to be adding it to is, of course, add button. That's going to be the main button target. Then we'll just do add button dot add ActionListener, AddListener. So now, anytime that button is pressed, so every single time the button is pressed, it'll go to AddListener's action performed thing. Now, the next thing we're going to do is, before we do that, we need to do add_button.set action command, which is going to set that to add string. Next thing we're going to do, we're just going to do add_button.set enabled false. So that means you can't press the button when the program starts up, because the text field that it's going to be corresponding to will be empty, and we don't want you to add any forces that don't have any names. That'll just be a very bad problem. So we don't want you to click it unless it's full. We'll handle enabling the button next episode, but as I said today, it's just going to be basic functionality. So now we're going to set up the remove button, and its thing is going to be remove string. So it's going to be remove all caps on that. Then similar to the previous one, dot set action command, remove string again. And last thing we're going to do this is set add action listener. And it's just going to be a new remove listener. Now we're going to deal with force field equals a new J text field, and force field dot add action listener, add listener again, and then force field dot get document, which returns a document object, and the document object is, just basically a document, like a Word document that contains all the things. But what we want to do with the document that corresponds to this text field is add a document listener, which again will be add listener. Of course. Now we're just going to do this little thing. Get the element at a certain index. And the index we're going to do is the list dot get selected index dot string, in case it's ever not a string, but it's going to be a string because we know it's a string. Get it? Okay, JPanel button pane. Now what we're going to do with this is that you can only add swing components to other swing components. So we're going to make a new panel that contains just the buttons, and then we're going to make a panel that contains the button panel and the and the force field. And then we're going to the whole thing that this thing is the force list, which it is a JPanel, it extends JPanel. That's going to contain the force panel and the list, and then we're going to eventually add a force list to our window. So the process there. So button button pane, we're going to set the layout. This time we're going to do a new layout. Now, as I said before, there are a lot of different layouts. So what I'm going to do about, well, you can just click here for the annotation. Will deliver you to the Oracle site. Oracle produces Java, and it'll tell you more about layouts pertaining to swing and how to use all the different layouts and what all the different layouts are. But there you go. And we'll continue right along. This box layout will pertain to button pane, and it'll be the special feature along the line axis. Now, as I did give you that little annotation, and so I don't waste time, I won't be explaining the layouts as much, but most of how programming is that you have to, learn things one by one. And of course, especially for programming, the internet is the best resource you can use for learning languages. Like if you don't know one little thing about Java, just Google it, or you could just request that I teach it to you in the comments if you think it is if other tutorials don't properly tell you how to do it to your needs, or yeah. Now we're just continuing along with the button. Now we're adding the other components to the button pane. We're adding the remove button, and then we're creating just a little space in between them, and then we're adding the add button. Now we're going to create, again, the other J panel, which will be the field pane. And now we're just going to do, field pane dot, we're going to set the layout to another box layout. And this time it's going to be pertaining to field pane, and it's going to be box layout dot y-axis, because we want it to go up and down. And we're going to add button pane. We're going to add a box dot create vertical strut, just going to be 5 pixels high, since all these measurements run on pixels. And then we're just going to add, of course, what we need is the force field, so we can actually enter stuff into the text field. So then after we add the force field, we're just going to do something simple, so it looks more pretty. We're going to add a border. In order to get a border, we're going to do a border factory dot create empty border, and it's just going to be 5 pixels on each side. That'll make the whole thing indented. Now again, with borders, there are many different types of borders and many different ways to construct borders. So here is the annotation will lead you to, again, the Oracle site and explain more about how borders work, because they're a very nice asset to learn and know. And of course, I would like you to know as much as you can about Java. So there you go. Now, as we continue, now since we do again have the absolute layout, we have to set the bounds of each component. So our bounds, it's going to start at 0, 0, and the width of this component, we're just going to 200 seems nice, and then we're going to do a height of 500. Now remember, our frame window is 600 pixels tall, but that's also including the toolbar. So when we get to the field pane and set bounds, as you see, our coordinates won't add up to the 600 that it should, because we're actually just going to make this 80. So we're because the toolbar in the top, when you actually make the window, it does also have a height of approximately 20 pixels. So we just account for that by making it 20 less, if you add these together, than the 600. And then, of course, the whole thing, we're going to add the list scroll pane, and then we're going to add the field pane. There you go. That's it. That's it for this episode. Again, we still have to add all the content to these listeners, which we'll do next episode. All we really have to do now is do frame.add force list. So now, if we run it, we'll hopefully get the correct thing. Oh, wait, we did one. I'm just going to turn this. We don't really need any of that yet. And since this is, unfortunately, since this is the frame is also on absolute positioning. Wait, this should work still. So yeah, we do need to set the bounds. So I'm going to do force list dot set bounds. It's going to start at 0, 0. Its width will be 200, and its height will be 580. So now if we run it, it should work. There. Now we have a whole thing. You can see This is very convenient doing this as opposed to anything else. We have our list. It started with net force. And again, you can add more indices to the list, more forces, and when it gets too long, since it's also in a scroll pane, then you can start scrolling. Here's the remove button, which J buttons are enabled by false. The add button is disabled because we said to disable it. And here's the text field where we can enter crazy stuff. Now eventually, as soon as we enter things into that, then the add button will be enabled, and when we press add, it'll clear the text field and then add something to this. Now in the next episode, we are going to add the functionalities to all the buttons, and if we have time, so it's either next episode or the next episode, depending on time limits, we're going to add something here. It will be another J panel, which will describe the force. It'll say the force, and eventually, one of the ending parts will be where it displays a sphere around here. That'll be our body, a part of our free body diagram, and then there'll be different arrow lines that'll look like arrows, if I can make it look like arrows, that'll describe each of the forces that you have, depending on the magnitude and the vector of the force, and then it'll have the net force vector, which will just be pointing in the net force, the direction and the magnitude. So yes, that has been this episode of the Physics Simulator tutorial series. And so yeah, I just said what we were gonna do next episode. Also, when I'm done, when I'm done, I'll add the source code and the finished program. I'll release that. I'll probably put obviously the source code will be going on GitHub, and I'll probably put the finished product on Mediafire and put the link to the finished application in our last episode of the series, or just a episode. I'll make an independent episode to just going through the finished product. So there you have it. I will see you next time, and good programming to you.